Welcome back, friends and arguably foe family. I think it's more like real family I have in here. Nice to see you again. What's left of me is nice to see what few there are of you. I, of course, expect most of the viewers to be here later anyway, since there's 0 people here right now. I am going to continue reading Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin, the 1968 fantasy classic. Hey, Blaze Design Company, how are you? Nice to see you. Nice to see somebody in here so soon. Talked about this last night. This has become a standard top shelf, I think marketed mostly as young adult fantasy, in part because it's a coming of age story with an adolescent protagonist. At least he's an adolescent at the beginning. Also because there's a whole bunch of dirt under my nails because of something I was cleaning earlier. I just realized that we're very professional around here. He goes to a wizard school, and that's the part we're going to get to tonight. How's the job hunt been? Blaze Design Company, they told me at the Pizza Hut I got to apply online, corporate. They probably need help, is what they told me. And I'm still waiting for the call back from the place I've been waiting for the call back from. So, yeah, when I get out of here tonight, I'm going to fill out an application online, chase them Monday, I guess. But that's the backup still. I still want to work at that. I mean, they didn't make me apply online, so there's that. I may have to eventually anyway. Maybe that's what they're waiting on, somebody to fill that out for me. What are you doing back there? Zoe, what happens when you do this? Are you gonna be all right there? Yeah, you want to come see the folks? You wanna make an appearance on the stream? Yeah. Yeah, this is my friend Zoe. You want to say hello to the folks at home? No, you want to get down and fuck around some more. I was letting them run around in the trailer, and then I brought them in here because I don't want to leave the door open for sound while I do the reading stream. I'm a little self-conscious about it too. Dave's hanging out in the living room. It's a little weird. Yeah. Is that nice, Zoe? You want me to rub your strange, itchy head? I mean, I wouldn't... I mean, I wouldn't let this interrupt my reading project, but obviously this is better content. Yes, Zoe. You gonna be all right now, buddy? Can I let you down? No, you need me to itch your face? Yes. Yes. All right. Yes, Blaze Design Company. The only thing that's annoying is that, like, I would like it to be... Yeah, I would like to be able to just apply at like 30 places at once and then have the 5 or 6 that have a job opening all reply to me at once and then pick one. That's burning my bridges for the next 3 jobs in the neighborhood if I did that. Which, it's fortunate the state of the job market is such I have to expect to have to get 3 more jobs in the neighborhood. All right. Let's get back to less sublunary matters, shall we? A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. Take off my broken glasses. This is where this novel starts to get real good. Also, chapter 4 is long, and as I recall, it kind of begs to be read all at once. So I'm going to read chapters 3 and 4. Hopefully I won't be too tired by the end of this. Chapter 3, The School for Wizards. Ged slept that night aboard Shadow. I suppose I should recap, right? I assume that almost everybody who comes in here hearing this is going to have just listened to me reading the first 2 chapters. But Ged is a very talented 13-year-old who's just signed up for wizard school, and he's been sort of hitchhiking boat to boat across the archipelago. Earthsea is an archipelago. It's a group of a couple of hundred islands. The continent on which these stories take place is not a continent at all. Come to think of it, there may be a reason why the only good Earthsea movie is Japanese. There is a miniseries based on, I think in part based on this book. By all accounts, I've heard it's bad. I think it's 90s. It's a 90s Hallmark miniseries or maybe a Sci-Fi Channel miniseries. I don't know if it's bad. I've just heard it's bad. And the Ghibli movie's good, but it's not based on this novel. I don't know what it's based on. It's either an original story or it's based on one of the short stories in the later collection that she published. Chapter 3, The School for Wizards. Ged slept that night aboard Shadow, that is the boat, and early in the morning parted with those first sea comrades of his, they shouting good wishes cheerily after him as he went up the docks. The town of Thwill is not large, its high houses huddling close over a few steep, narrow streets. To Ged, however, it seemed a city, and not knowing where to go, he asked the first townsman of Thwill he met where he would find the warder of the school on Roke. The man looked at him sidelong a while and said, "The wise don't need to ask, the fool asks in vain," and so went on along the street. It was like asking for directions in Boston. Yes, Zoe, you need to fuck stuff up some more? You just made me swear on stream. I'm never going to be able to not swear on stream. Never. Yeah, it's like asking for directions in Massachusetts. Dude, fucking, the wise don't need to ask, the fool asks in vain, dude. Ged went uphill till he came out into a square, rimmed on 3 sides by the houses with their sharp slate roofs, and on the 4th side by the wall of a great building whose few small windows were higher than the chimney tops of the houses. A fort or castle, it seemed, built of mighty gray blocks of stone. In the square beneath it, market booths were set up, and there was some coming and going of people. Ged asked his question of an old woman with a basket of mussels, and she replied, "You cannot always find the warder where he is, but sometimes you find him where he is not," and went on crying her mussels to sell. In the great building, near one corner, there was a mean little door of wood. Ged went to this and knocked loud. To the old man who opened the door, he said, "I bear a letter from the mage Ogion of Gaunt to the warder of the school on this island. I want to find the warder, but I will not hear more riddles and scoffing." "This is the school," the old man said mildly. "I am the doorkeeper. Enter if you can." Ged stepped forward. It seemed to him that he had passed through the doorway, yet he stood outside on the pavement where he had stood before. Once more he stepped forward, and once more he remained standing outside the door. The doorkeeper inside watched him with mild eyes. Ged was not so much baffled as angry, for this seemed like a further mockery to him. With voice and hand he made the opening spell which his aunt had taught him long ago. It was the prize among all her stock of spells, and he wove it well now. But it was only a witch's charm, and the power that held this doorway was not moved at all. When that failed, Ged stood a long while there on the pavement. At last he looked at the old man who waited inside. "I cannot enter," he said unwillingly, "unless you help me." The doorkeeper answered, "Say your name." Then again Ged stood still a while, for a man never speaks his own name aloud until more than his life's safety is at stake. "I am Ged," he said aloud. Stepping forward, then he entered the open doorway. Yet it seemed to him that though the light was behind him, a shadow followed him in at his heels. He saw also as he turned that the doorway through which he had come was not plain wood as he had thought, but ivory without joint or seam. It was cut, as he knew later, from a tooth of the great dragon. The door that the old man closed behind him was of polished horn, through which the daylight shone dimly, and on its inner face was carved the 1,000-leaved tree. "Welcome to this house, lad," the doorkeeper said, and without saying more led him through halls and corridors to an open court far inside the walls of the building. The court was partly paved with stone, but was... You've got to stop doing this. Get out of there. Stop doing that. I told you to stop. Every time you do that, I tell you to stop. You can't do that, Zoe. I know you're a little dumb kitty. It's really dangerous what she's doing when she does that, and she's doing it every stream now. Like, she just thinks that this is a fun thing to do to get my attention while the stream's going on. There's a whole bunch of stuff piled up over here in a way that's really just sort of not safe. Zoe, you landed wrong when I flung you, buddy. Are you all right? Are you okay? Zoe's so clumsy she didn't land right when I dropped her on the floor just now. You okay, buddy? Yeah, you're purring. Can you walk good? Can you? All your legs are working? All right. All right. This is why I can't let them out here or outside in the... She's really dumb. She's really clumsy, and she explores and she climbs. Really worry about her a lot. I mean, she's messing with me on purpose while I do these reading streams. Like, that's her idea of fun. Yes, you're very cute, Zoe. She likes being in my lap while I read, and I'm doing this standing up here. There isn't a good way to do it sitting down, so... The light is actually the problem with that. With what I'm thinking here. Yeah. Maybe next time, Zoe. I don't know. Maybe I should... hold on. Maybe if I make a little room for Zoe up here. Pardon me, guys, while I make accommodations for my cat. There. You can lay right there. All right? Yes, I love you too, Zoe. Thank you very much, buddy. All right, are you going to let me read? It's a very professional operation, as I said earlier. Yes, Zoe, I love you, buddy. Gotta keep you guys safe. You cannot be climbing on stuff that's going to fall on you and kill you, buddy. Welcome to this house, lad, the doorkeeper said, and without saying more led him through halls and corridors to an open court far inside the walls of the building. The court was partly paved with stone, but was roofless, and on a grass plot a fountain played under young trees in the sunlight. There Ged waited alone some while. I've already made room for you up here, Zoe. I know, I love you too. There's no way you can crawl upright on the keyboard, buddy. You can't do it. Hey, Wilson, how are ya? The cats are just, they won't let me do these reading streams. I don't know why this particularly makes them feisty. Like, it's weird. I think because every other place I've done this, the hotel room and in Lima, like, I could sit. Like, I do it all standing here. And I'm not sitting down at all, which is part of the reason why you guys haven't seen me play guitar but once. I had to do things in a different configuration. I wasn't going to smoke tobacco on this stream, but the cats have driven me to it. It's fine. How are you, Wilson? It's nice to see you. I just wanted to read a little story, a little bedtime story. I said elf book earlier, but I don't think there's actually any elves in Wizard of Earthsea, strictly speaking. Like, it's categorically an elf book. Pejoratively, I think it's a pejorative to call fantasy elf books, I think. Oh my god, is my pipe broken now? I'm gonna cry. It really is. Something's wrong with my pipe. It's great. Hello, I can't Tory Reed. I'm smoking tobacco. I was trying not to smoke on stream at all. The cats just got weird. The pipe's not even working. My glasses aren't working. It's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. Nice to see you again. Right. I'm going to back up to the top of the paragraph. Welcome to this house, lad, the doorkeeper said, and without saying more, led him through halls and corridors to an open court far inside the walls of the building. The court was partly paved with stone, but was roofless, and on a grass plot a fountain played under young trees in the sunlight. There Ged waited alone some while. He stood still, and his heart beat hard, for it seemed to him that he felt presences and powers at work unseen about him here, and he knew that this place was built not only of stone, but of magic stronger than stone. He stood in the innermost room of the house of the wise, and it was open to the sky. Then suddenly he was aware of a man clothed in white who watched him through the falling water of the fountain. As their eyes met, a bird sang aloud in the branches of the tree. In that moment, Gad understood the singing of the bird, and the language of the water falling in the basin of the fountain, and the shape of the clouds, and the beginning and end of the wind that stirred the leaves. It seemed to him that he himself was a word spoken by the sunlight. Then that moment passed, and he and the world were as before, or almost as before. He went forward to kneel before the Archmage, holding out to him the letter written by Ogion. The Archmage Nemerly, warder of Roke, was an old man, older, it was said, than any man then living. His voice quavered like the bird's voice when he spoke, welcoming Ged kindly. Although it was so very ordinary. His voice quavered like the bird's voice when he spoke, welcoming Ged kindly. His hair and beard and robe were white, and he seemed as if all darkness and heaviness had been leached out of him by the slow usage of the years, leaving him white and worn as driftwood that has been a century adrift. My eyes are old, I cannot read what your master writes, he said in his quavering voice. Read me the letter, lad. So Ged made out and read aloud the writing, which was in Hardic runes, and said no more than this. Lord Nemerly, I send you one who will be greatest of the wizards of Gaunt if the wind blow true. This was signed, not with Ogion's true name, which Ged had never yet learned, but with Ogion's rune, the closed mouth. He who holds the earthquake on a leash has sent you, for which be doubly welcome. Young Ogion was dear to me when he came here from Gaunt. Now tell me of the seas and portents of your voyage, lad. A fair passage, lord, but for the storm yesterday. What ship brought you here? Shadow, trading from the Andrades. Whose will sent you here? My own. The Archmage looked at Ged and looked away, and began to speak in a tongue that Ged did not understand, mumbling as will an old man whose wits go wandering among the years and islands. Yet in among his mumbling there were words of what the bird had sung and what the water had said falling. He was not laying a spell, and yet there was a power in his voice that moved Ged's mind so that the boy was bewildered, and for an instant seemed to behold himself standing in a strange, vast desert place alone among shadows. Yet all along he was in the sunlit court, hearing the fountain fall. A great black bird, a raven of Oskill, came walking over the stone terrace and the grass. It came to the hem of the Archmage's robe and stood there all black with its dagger beak and eyes like pebbles staring sidelong at Ged. It pecked 3 times on the white staff Nemerly leaned on, and the old wizard ceased his muttering and smiled. Run and play, lad, he said at last as to a little child. Ged knelt again on one knee to him. When he rose, the archmage was gone. Only the raven stood eyeing him, its beak outstretched as if to peck the vanished staff. It spoke in what Ged guessed might be the speech of Oskill. Ternan Uspuk, it said, croaking. Ternan Uspek Orak. And it strutted off as it had come. Ged turned to leave the courtyard, wondering where he should go. Under the archway, he was met by a tall youth who greeted him very courteously, bowing his head. I am called Jasper, Enwit, son of the domain of Eog on Havnor Isle. I am at your service today, to show you about the great house and answer your questions as I can. How shall I call you, sir? Now it seemed to Ged, a mountain villager who had never been among the sons of rich merchants and noblemen, that this fellow was scoffing at him with his service and his sir and his bowing and scraping. He answered shortly, Sparrowhawk they call me. The other waited a moment as if expecting some more mannerly response, and getting none. Okay, let me back up. I'm fine. Dude, why are you fucking around on my table again? Pie whack it. Oh, because it's streamed, so I'm going to give you treats. But we're out of treats. Because that's how poor we is. I know Pie whack it. It sucks. Do you guys want to see Pie whack it? Since she's bugging too. But Pie does not like to be held like a baby. Pie whack it hates it when I hold her like a baby. She's like, no, I am no baby. Right? Yeah, you hate it. All right. There you go. It's fine, buddy. But I don't have any treats. You gotta wait. It's a hard knock life for us, I know. It's a hard knock life for us. I only have like 5 treats left in the bag, buddy. I'm not gonna give them to you right now. I'm gonna save them. I know it's brutal. You and your sister will have to make do. You gonna be all right, buddy? No, you're not gonna be all right. Whack it. Hop down. Go ahead. Hop down. Yeah, my pipe really is broken. I don't know what's going on here. Something with the stem. It's an antagonizer pipe. No, it doesn't have enough smoke. It's good. I should quit smoking anyway. I don't need anything fun. He answered shortly, Sparrowhawk they call me. The other waited a moment as if expecting some more mannerly response, and getting none, straightened up and turned a little aside. He was 2 or 3 years older than Ged, very tall, and he moved and carried himself with stiff grace, posing, Ged thought, like a dancer. By the way, it's spelled G-E-D. It seems like Jed is the way I read it when I first read this book when I was a kid. But it seems like that would be J-E-D, so it must be Ged. But this is the second night I have forgotten to actually look up. I mean, it's a pretty famous book, so there's probably some record online of how it was intended to be pronounced. I'm going to be saying it wrong the whole book, and I'm going to regret that. He was 2 or 3 years older than Ged, very tall, and he moved and carried himself with stiff grace, posing, Ged thought, like a dancer. He wore a gray cloak with hood thrown back. The first place he took Ged was the wardrobe room, where as a student of the school, Ged might find himself another such cloak that fitted him, and any other clothing he might need. He put on the dark gray cloak he had chosen, and Jasper said, Now you are one of us. Jasper had a way of smiling faintly as he spoke, which made Ged look for a jeer hidden in his polite words. Do clothes make the mage? He answered, sullen. No, said the older boy, though I have heard that manners make the man. Where now? Where you will. I do not know the house. Jasper took him down the corridors of the great house, showing him the open courts and the roofed halls, the room of shelves where the books of lore and rune tomes were kept, the great hearth hall where all the school gathered on festival days, and upstairs, in the towers and under the roofs, the small cells where the students and masters slept. Ged's was in the south tower, with a window looking down over the steep roofs of Thwill town to the sea. Like the other sleeping cells, it had no furnishing but a straw-filled mattress in the corner. "We live very plain here," said Jasper, "but I expect you won't mind that." "I'm used to it." Presently, trying to show himself an equal of this polite, disdainful youth, he added, "I suppose you weren't when you first came." Jasper looked at him, and his look said without words, "What could you possibly know about what I, son of the lord of the domain of Eog on the Isle of have nor am or am not used to?" What Jasper said aloud was simply, "Come on this way." A gong had been rung while they were upstairs, and they came down to eat the noon meal at the long table of the refectory, along with 100 or more boys and young men. Each waited on himself, joking with the cooks through the window hatches of the kitchen that opened into the refectory, loading his plate from great bowls of food that steamed on the sills, sitting where he pleased at the long table. "They say," Jasper told Ged, "that no matter how many sit at this table, there is always room." Certainly there was room both for many noisy groups of boys talking and eating mightily, and for older fellows, their gray cloaks clasped with silver at the neck, who sat more quietly by pairs or alone, with grave, pondering faces, as if they had much to think about. Jasper took Ged to sit with a heavy-set fellow called Vetch, who said nothing much but shoveled in his food with a will. He had the accent of the East Reach and was very dark of skin, not red-brown like Ged and Jasper and most folk of the archipelago, but black-brown. It's an interesting touch that all the people in all of the Earthsea stories are not white. They're brown, they're islander brown. Um, Ursula Le Guin's background was as an anthropologist. I don't know much about her, but I do know that she was a trained anthropologist, and it shows in her science fiction and her fantasy. Um, she also seems pretty deeply versed in American Indian stuff. Um, I don't know how much that ends up playing in the Earthsea stories. I haven't read this all the way through for 20 or 30 years. He had the accent, Vetch, that is, had the accent of the East Reach and was very dark of skin, not red-brown like Ged and Jasper and most folk of the archipelago, but black-brown. He was plain, and his manners were not polished. He grumbled about the dinner when he had finished it, but then turning to Ged said, "At least it's not illusion like so much around here. It sticks to your ribs." Ged did not know what he meant, but he felt a certain liking for him, and was glad when after the meal he stayed with them. "Dude, I'm not going to give you treats for messing around and injuring yourself pulling down piles of stuff." I wish I could just set them free. They're welcome to run around in the trailer, but then they will keep asking me to open the door to get back in. Like, it'll be the same problem. Stop. You know that. Stop. Stop. What? It's your sister? Zoe. Out of there. Stop doing this. Stop doing this. I'm going to hit you with water next. Yeah, you're going to get water. I'm giving up. I'm going to give them food anyway. Maybe will you guys be quiet if I give you food in the food bowl? Fresh food. Okay? Then we've got lots of extra food. I hate even being annoyed with them on stream. It's their show. Obviously, Pi and Zoe are they're what matter here. I'm really reading to them, and everyone hanging out in here is waiting for them to make their appearances. Oh my god, I'm gonna smoke some reefer. It's really bad form. For someone as professional as me, it's very bad form to just smoke openly. Are we? Is everything all set now? Do you hear the cats crunching? Do they sound happy? Does that sound like a happy crunching? It does, actually. They went down into the town that Ged might learn his way about it. Few and short as were the streets of Thwill, they turned and twisted curiously among the high-roofed houses, and the way was easy to lose. It was a strange town, and strange also its people, fishermen and workmen and artisans like any others, but so used to the sorcery that is ever at play on the Isle of the Wise that they seemed half sorcerers themselves. They talked, as Ged had learned, in riddles, and not one of them would blink to see a boy turn into a fish or a house fly up into the air. But knowing it for a schoolboy prank would go on cobbling shoes or cutting up mutton unconcerned. Coming up past the back door, that's capital B, capital D, like the back door it's a proper noun. Coming up past the back door and around through the gardens of the great house, the three boys crossed the clear-running Thwillburn on a wooden bridge and went on northward among woods and pastures. The path climbed and wound. They passed oak groves where shadows lay thick for all the brightness of the sun. There was one grove not far away to the left that Ged could never quite see plainly. The path never reached it, though it always seemed to be about to. He could not even make out what kind of trees they were. Vetch, seeing him gazing, said softly, "That is the imminent grove. We can't come there yet." In the hot sunlit pastures, yellow flowers bloomed. "Sparkweed," said Jasper. "They grow where the wind dropped the ashes of burning Ilian, when Areth Akbi defended the inward isles from the Fire Lord." He blew on a withered flower head, and the seeds shaken loose went up on the wind like sparks of fire in the sun. The path led them up and around the base of a great green hill, round and treeless, the hill that Ged had seen from the ship as they entered the charmed waters of Roke Island. On the hillside, Jasper halted. "At home in Havnor I heard much about Gauntish wizardry, and always in praise, so that I've wanted for a long time to see the manner of it. Here now we have a Gauntishman, and we stand on the slopes of Roke Knoll, whose roots go down to the center of the earth. All spells are strong here. Play us a trick, Sparrowhawk. Show us your style." Ged, confused and taken aback, said nothing. "Later on, Jasper," Vetch said in his plain way. "Let him be a while. He has either skill or power, or the doorkeeper wouldn't have let him in. Why shouldn't he show it now as well as later, right, Sparrowhawk?" "I have both skill and power," Ged said. "Show me what kind of thing you're talking about." "Illusions, of course, tricks, games of seeming, like this." Pointing his finger, Jasper spoke a few strange words, and where he pointed on the hillside among the green grasses a little thread of water trickled and grew, and now a spring gushed out and the water went running down the hill. Ged put his hand in the stream, and it felt wet, drank of it, and it was cool. Yet for all that it would quench no thirst, being but illusion. Jasper, with another word, stopped the water, and the grasses waved dry in the sunlight. "Now you, Vetch," he said with his cool smile. Vetch scratched his head and looked glum, but he took up a bit of earth in his hand and began to sing tunelessly over it, molding it with his dark fingers and shaping it, pressing it, stroking it, and suddenly it was a small creature like a bumblebee or furry fly that flew humming off over Roke Knoll and vanished. Ged stood staring, crestfallen. What did he know but mere village witchery, spells to call goats, cure warts, move loads or mend pots? "I do no such tricks as these," he said. That was enough for Vetch, who was for going on, but Jasper said, "Why don't you?" "Sorcery is not a game. We Gauntishmen do not play it for pleasure or praise," Ged answered haughtily. "What do you play it for?" Jasper inquired. "Money?" "No." But he could not think of anything more to say that would hide his ignorance and save his pride. Jasper laughed, not ill-humoredly, and went on, leading them on around Roke Knoll. And Ged followed, sullen and sore-hearted, knowing he had behaved like a fool and blaming Jasper for it. That night, as he lay wrapped in his cloak on the mattress in his cold, unlit cell of stone, in the utter silence of the great house of Roke, The strangeness of the place and the thought of all the spells and sorceries that had been worked there began to come over him heavily. Darkness surrounded him. Dread filled him. He wished he were anywhere else but Roke. But Vetch came to the door, a little bluish ball of weir light nodding over his head to light the way, and asked if he could come in and talk a while. He asked Ged about Gaunt, and then spoke fondly of his own home isles of the East Reach, telling how the smoke of village hearth fires is blown across that quiet sea at evening between the small islands with funny names, Corp, Cop and Hulp, Venway and Vemish, Iffish, Coppish and Sneg. When he sketched the shapes of those lands on the stones of the floor with his finger to show Ged how they lay, the lines he drew shone dim as if drawn with a stick of silver for a while before they faded. Vetch had been 3 years at the school, and soon would be made sorcerer. He thought no more of performing the lesser arts of magic than a bird thinks of flying. Yet a greater, unlearned skill he possessed, which was the art of kindness. That night, and always from then on, he offered and gave Ged friendship, a sure and open friendship which Ged could not help but return. Yet Vetch was also friendly to Jasper, who had made Ged into a fool that first day on Roke Knoll. Ged would not forget this, nor, it seemed, would Jasper, who always spoke to him with a polite voice and a mocking smile. Ged's pride would not be slighted or condescended to. He swore to prove to Jasper, and to all the rest of them among whom Jasper was something of a leader, how great his power really was, some day. For none of them, for all their clever tricks, had saved a village by wizardry. Of none of them had Ogion written that he would be the greatest wizard of Gaunt. So bolstering up his pride, he set all his strong will on the work they gave him, the lessons and crafts and histories and skills taught by the gray-cloaked masters of Roke, who were called the Nine. Part of each day he studied with the master chanter, learning the deeds of heroes and the lays of wisdom, beginning with the oldest of all songs, the creation of Ea. Then with a dozen other lads he would practice with the master Windkey, at arts of wind and weather. Oh, Master Windkey. I had to decide on the fly. Then with a dozen other lads he would practice with the Master Windkey at arts of wind and weather. Whole bright days of spring and early summer they spent out in Roke Bay in light catboats, practicing steering by word and stilling waves and speaking to the world's wind and raising up the mage wind. These are very intricate skills, and frequently Ged's head got whacked by the swinging boom as the boat jibed under a wind suddenly blowing backwards, or his boat and another collided, though they had the whole bay to navigate in, or all three boys in his boat went swimming unexpectedly as the boat was swamped by a huge unintended wave. There were quieter expeditions ashore, other days, with the master herbal, who taught the ways and properties of things that grow, and the master hand taught sleight and jugglery, and the lesser arts of changing. At all these studies Ged was apt, and within a month was bettering lads who had been a year at Roke before him. Especially the tricks of illusion came to him so easily that it seemed he had been born knowing them and needed only to be reminded. The master hand was a gentle and light-hearted old man who had endless delight in the wit and beauty of the crafts he taught. Ged soon felt no awe of him, but asked him for this spell and that spell, and always the master smiled and showed him what he wanted. But one day, having it in mind to put Jasper to shame at last, Ged said to the master hand in the court of seeming, "Sir, all these charms are much the same. Knowing one, you know them all. And as soon as the spell weaving ceases, the illusion vanishes. Now if I make a pebble into a diamond," and he did so with a word and a flick of his wrist, "what must I do to make that diamond remain diamond? How is the changing spell locked and made to last?" The master hand looked at the jewel that glittered on Ged's palm, bright as the prize of a dragon's hoard. The old master murmured one word, "Tolk," and there lay the pebble, no jewel but a rough gray bit of rock. The master took it and held it out on his own hand. "This is a rock. Tolk in the true speech," he said, looking mildly up at Ged now. "A bit of the stone of which Roke Isle is made, a little bit of the dry land on which men live. It is itself. It is part of the world. By the illusion change you can make it look like a diamond, or a flower, or a fly, or an eye, or a flame." The rock flickered from shape to shape as he named them and returned to rock. But that is mere seeming. Illusion fools the beholder's senses. It makes him see and hear and feel that the thing is changed. But it does not change the thing. To change this rock into a jewel, you must change its true name. And to do that, my son, even to so small a scrap of the world is to change the world. It can be done. Indeed, it can be done. It is the art of the master changer, and you will learn it when you are ready to learn it. But you must not change one thing, one pebble, one grain of sand, until you know what good and evil will follow on that act. The world is in balance, in equilibrium. A wizard's power of changing and of summoning can shake the balance of the world. It is dangerous, that power. It is most perilous. It must follow knowledge and serve need. To light a candle is to cast a shadow. He looked down at the pebble again. A rock is a good thing too, you know, he said, speaking less gravely. If the Isles of Earthsea were all made of diamond, we'd lead a hard life here. Enjoy illusions, lad, and let the rocks be rocks. He smiled, but Ged left dissatisfied. Press a mage for his secrets, and he would always talk, like Ogion, about balance and danger and the dark. But surely a wizard, one who had gone past these childish tricks of illusion to the true arts of summoning and change, was powerful enough to do what he pleased, and balance the world as seemed best to him, and drive back darkness with his own light. In the corridor he met Jasper, who, since Ged's accomplishments began to be praised about the school, spoke to him in a way that seemed more friendly, but was more scoffing. You look gloomy, Sparrowhawk, he said now. Did your juggling charms go wrong? Seeking as always to put himself on equal footing with Jasper, Ged answered the question, ignoring its ironic tone. I'm sick of juggling, he said. Sick of these illusion tricks fit only to amuse idle lords in their castles and domains. The only true magic they've taught me yet on Roke is making weir light and some weather working. The rest is mere foolery. Even foolery is dangerous, said Jasper, in the hands of a fool. At that, Ged turned as if he had been slapped and took a step towards Jasper. But the older boy smiled as if he had not intended any insult, nodded his head in his stiff, graceful way, and went on. Standing there with rage in his heart, looking after Jasper, Ged swore to himself to outdo his rival, and not in some mere illusion match, but in a test of power. He would prove himself and humiliate Jasper. He would not let the fellow stand there looking down at him, graceful, disdainful, hateful. Ged did not stop to think why Jasper might hate him. He only knew why he hated Jasper. The other apprentices had soon learned they could seldom match themselves against Ged either in sport or in earnest, and they said of him, some in praise and some in spite, he's a wizard born, he'll never let you beat him. Jasper alone neither praised him nor avoided him, but simply looked down at him, smiling slightly. And therefore Jasper stood alone as his rival, who must be put to shame. He did not see, or would not see, that in this rivalry, which he clung to and fostered as part of his own pride, there was anything of the danger, the darkness, of which the master hand had mildly warned him. When he was not moved by pure rage, he knew very well that he was as yet no match for Jasper or any of the older boys, and so he kept at his work and went on as usual. At the end of summer, the work was slackened somewhat, so there was more time for sport. Spellboat races down in the harbor, feats of illusion in the courts of the great house, and in the long evenings, in the groves, wild games of hide and seek, where hiders and seeker were both invisible, and only voices moved laughing and calling among the trees, following and dodging the quick, faint, weir lights. Then, as autumn came, they set to their tasks afresh, practicing new magic. So Ged's first months at Roke went by fast, full of passions and wonders. In winter it was different. He was sent with 7 other boys across Roke Island to the farthest northmost cape, where stands the Isolate Tower. There by himself lived the Master Namer, who was called by a name that had no meaning in any language, Karem Karmarok. No farm or dwelling lay within miles of the tower. Grim it stood above the northern cliffs. Gray were the clouds over the seas of winter, endless the lists and ranks and rounds of names that the Namer's 8 pupils must learn. Amongst them in the tower's high room, Kurem Karmlurak sat on a high seat, writing down lists of names that must be learned before the ink faded at midnight, leaving the parchment blank again. Hello, Leninade. How are you? Nice to see you. You gave me an excuse to stop and drink some water. I suppose it doesn't need pointing out that this wizard school chapter is kind of just kills it. Like Rowling spends like 3,000 pages exploring the same set of ideas, but this is still on a different level. I'm pretty good, Leninade. I'm having a good night. I really love this book. I haven't read it all the way through since I was in my 20s. Like, I think the last time I read it all the way through, I was 22 or 23. I'd like to write a movie of it. I assume it hasn't, nobody's made a straight killer movie of this book because it's just tricky to adapt. It's not dialogue and character driven the right way. But man. It's worth while I'm interrupting to say again, she wrote this in 1968. The paperback republication that led to it becoming a perennial bestseller of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings by Ballantine in the United States. That's, I think, 66. I might be wrong. I'd have to look it up. But this was definitely post-Tolkien fantasy, meaning now this kind of epic fantasy, heroic fantasy is a way to make money. Tolkien was the first clear, straight bestseller based on genre within this genre. There wasn't young adult fantasy like this or adult fantasy like this before Lord of the Rings was reprinted in the mid-60s. I'd kind of forgotten how really good this book is. I don't think the sequels are, at least the second and third books, I didn't like them when I was 10 or 11 when I first read these books. I might like them more now. And I've read a couple of the stories in the later short story collection she wrote. I think it's called Tales of Earthsea. And the short stories I read are great. I wonder if this stuff came easy to her. I haven't read any of her science fiction. I've read a couple of stories. Everything I've read by her is really, really good. She might still be alive. She definitely lived to the far side of her 90s. Like, she lived to be at least 91 or 92 and was still like doing interviews and an active adult, like with her mental faculties intact. I don't know when she last published fiction. All right, we'll stop getting distracted. Right, the Names Master. Amongst them, in the tower's high room, Curram Carmarok sat on a high seat, writing down lists of names that must be learned before the ink faded at midnight, leaving the parchment blank again. It was cold and half dark, and always silent there, except for the scratching of the master's pen and the sighing, maybe, of a student who must learn before midnight the name of every cape, point, bay, sound, inlet, channel, harbor, shallows, reef, and rock of the shores of Lasso, a little islet of the Pelnish Sea. If the student complained, the master might say nothing but lengthen the list, or he might say, he who would be sea master must know the true name of every drop of water in the sea. Ged sighed sometimes, but he did not complain. He saw that in this dusty and fathomless matter of learning the true name of every place, thing, and being, the power he wanted lay like a jewel at the bottom of a dry well. For magic consists in this, the true naming of a thing. So Curram Carmarok had said to them once, their first night in the tower. He never repeated it, but Ged did not forget his words. Many a mage of great power, he had said, has spent his whole life to find out the name of one single thing, one single lost or hidden name. And still the lists are not finished, nor will they be till world's end. Listen, and you will see why. In the world under the sun, and in the other world that has no sun, there is much that has nothing to do with men and men's speech, and there are powers beyond our power. But magic, true magic, is worked only by those beings who speak the Hardic tongue of Earthsea, or the old speech from which it grew. That is the language dragons speak, and the language Segoi spoke who made the islands of the world.
and the language of our lays and songs, spells, enchantments, and invocations. Its words lie hidden and changed among our Hardic words. We call the foam on waves sukien. That word is made from two words of the old speech, suk, feather, and inyen, the sea. Feather of the sea is foam. But you cannot charm the foam calling it sukien. You must use its own true name in the old speech, which is essa. Any witch knows a few of these words in the old speech, and a mage knows many. But there are many more, and some have been lost over the ages, and some have been hidden, and some are known only to dragons and to the old powers of earth, and some are known to no living creature, and no man could learn them all, for there is no end to that language. Here is the reason. The sea's name is Inyen, well and good, but what we call the inmost sea has its own name also in the old speech. Since no thing can have two true names, Inyen can mean only all the sea except the inmost sea. And of course it does not mean even that, for there are seas and bays and straits beyond counting that bear names of their own. So if some mage sea master were mad enough to try to lay a spell of storm or calm over all the ocean, his spell must say not only that word Inyan, but the name of every stretch and bit and part of the sea through all the archipelago and all the outer reaches and beyond to where names cease. Thus, that which gives us the power to work magic sets the limits of that power. A mage can control only what is near him, what he can name exactly and wholly. And this is well. If it were not so, the wickedness of the powerful or the folly of the wise would long ago have sought to change what cannot be changed, and equilibrium would fail. The unbalanced sea would overwhelm the islands where we perilously dwell, and in the old silence all voices and all names would be lost. Ged thought long on these words, and they went deep in his understanding. Yet the majesty of the task could not make the work of that long year in the tower less hard and dry. And at the end of the year, Karem Karmarak said to him, "You have made a good beginning, but no more. Wizards speak truth." And it was true that all the mastery of names that Ged had toiled to win that year was the mere start of what he must go on learning all his life. He was let go from the isolate tower sooner than those who had come with him, for he had learned quicker, but that was all the praise he got. He walked south across the island alone in the early winter, along townless, empty roads. As night came on, it rained. He said no charm to keep the rain off him, for the weather of Roke was in the hands of the master Wind-Key and might not be tampered with. He took shelter under a great pendic tree, and lying there wrapped in his cloak, he thought of his old master Ogion, who might still be on his autumn wanderings over the heights of Gaunt, sleeping out with leafless branches for a roof and falling rain for house walls. That made Ged smile, for he found the thought of Ogion always a comfort to him. He fell asleep with a peaceful heart, there in the cold darkness full of the whisper of water. At dawn, waking, he lifted his head. The rain had ceased. He saw, sheltered in the folds of his cloak, a little animal curled up asleep which had crept there for warmth. He wondered, seeing it, for it was a rare, strange beast, an otak. I can't stand J.K. Rowling. I read the Harry Potter books to my kids because they loved them. Glad Rowling imploded because I always felt the gnomes were anti-Semitic. Well, I don't love Rowling. I only read the first one. I watched all the movies. She's sort of stuffy, and yeah, she doesn't. It's not really fantasy literature like this. There's no element of wonder, and she isn't. The general drift, the thematic underpinnings of Rowling's Harry Potter books are that school is rewarding, but if you keep learning, you eventually learn that your teachers are bad people, and also everybody dies. Like, it's not very expansive or expanding. It's not edifying in some pure sense, and that sort of undercuts the original message of school being good. Like, it's like Like the first couple Harry Potter stories are about how school is a mystery and a wonderment. And yeah. Well, this book is really special, and of course, it goes on from the school episode. The wizard school it's the story of a wizard, um, not just his schooling. But this wizard school chapter is pretty great. Um, uh, it does the thing it has in common with Rowling is it does capture the feeling of going away to school, like this chapter reminds me of being the gifted kid in the gifted kid classes in high school, taking extension classes in music when I was 17. And it reminds me of going away to college, living in the dorm at Emerson, of course. Right, and OTAK, O-T-A-K. At dawn, waking, he lifted his head. The rain had ceased. He saw, sheltered in the folds of his cloak, a little animal curled up asleep which had crept there for warmth. He wondered, seeing it, for it was a rare, strange beast, an otak. These creatures are found only on 4 southern isles of the archipelago, Roke, Ensmer, Pody, and Wathort. They are small and sleek, with broad faces, and fur dark brown or brindle, and great bright eyes. Their teeth are cruel, and their temper fierce, so they are not made pets of. They have no call or cry or any voice. Ged stroked this one, and it woke and yawned, showing a small brown tongue and white teeth, but it was not afraid. Otak, he said, and then remembering the 1,000 names of beasts he had learned in the tower, he called it by its true name in the old speech. Hoeg, do you want to come with me? The otak sat itself down on his open hand and began to wash its fur. He put it up on his shoulder in the folds of his hood, and there it rode. Sometimes during the day it jumped down and darted off into the woods, but it always came back to him, once with a wood mouse it had caught. He laughed and told it to eat the mouse, for he was fasting, this night being the festival of sun return. So he came in the wet dusk past Roke Knoll, and saw bright weir lights playing in the rain over the roofs of the great house, and he entered there and was welcomed by his masters and companions in the firelit hall. It was like a homecoming to Ged, who had no home to which he could ever return. Let me back up. It was like a homecoming to Ged, who had no home to which he could ever return. He was happy to see so many faces he knew, and happiest to see Vetch come forward to greet him with a wide smile on his dark face. He had missed his friend this year, more than he knew. Vetch had been made sorcerer this fall, and was apprentice no more, but that set no barrier between them. They fell to talking at once, and it seemed to Ged that he said more to Vetch in that first hour than he had said during the whole long year at the Isolate Tower. The otak still rode his shoulder, nestling in the fold of his hood as they sat at dinner at long tables set up for the festival in the hearth hall. Vetch marveled at the little creature, and once put up his hand to stroke it, but the otak snapped its sharp teeth at him. He laughed. They say, Sparrowhawk, that a man favored by a wild beast is a man to whom the old powers of stone and spring will speak in human voice. They say Gontish wizards often keep familiars, said Jasper, who sat on the other side of Vetch. Our Lord Nemerly has his raven, and songs say the Red Mage of Arc led a wild boar on a gold chain. But I never heard of any sorcerer keeping a rat in his hood. At that they all laughed, and Ged laughed with them. It was a merry night, and he was joyful to be there in the warmth and merriment, keeping festival with his companions. But, like all Jasper ever said to him, the jest set his teeth on edge. That night the Lord of O was a guest of the school, himself a sorcerer of renown. He had been a pupil of the Archmage, and returned sometimes to Roke for the winter festival or the long dance in summer. With him was his lady, slender and young, bright as new copper, her black hair crowned with opals. It was seldom that any woman sat in the halls of the great house, and some of the old masters looked at her sidelong, disapproving, but the young men looked at her with all their eyes. For such a one, said Vetch to Ged, I could work vast enchantments. He sighed and laughed. It's often been remarked that Ursula Le Guin does not write like a girl, but that is generational. It would have been in this kind of fantasy. It would have been very odd. I mean, the first women to write in a very womanly kind of tone and voice, in this kind of fantasy in this field, are coming up in her generation. Really. Before the 1970s, I don't know. I don't know what the literary equivalent would be of dressing real butch, but that is what was expected of women in writing fantasy and science fiction before about 1965. Pretty, not exclusively, but I mean, the women who are known to be female writers, I saying they wrote like men is putting it odd, but you guys know what I mean. But she particularly nails it. I'm not sure, like if you just handed me this book and I read it and then asked me the gender of its author or the race, actually, I wouldn't know. And that is definitely to her credit. She may still be alive. She was white. It's an interesting touch that she makes like all of Earthsea is not white. It's a non-white continent. It's interesting. There's no particular reason for her to mention that, except she's comparing the skin color of people from different parts of the archipelago. Because her background was in anthropology, she would have noticed very carefully, as Amos Tutuola would have said, she would have noticed very carefully the race politics embedded in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, which of course are pervasive and fascinating and not particularly extensively remarked on or discussed. Elves. Elves are intrinsically race politics. I'm not sure if everybody has noticed that. Yes, of course they have, Rogan. Some of them would rather not, but for such a one, said Vetch to Ged, I could work vast enchantments. He sighed and laughed. She's only a woman, Ged replied. The Princess Elfaran was only a woman, said Vetch, and for her sake all Enlad was laid waste, and the hero mage of Havnor died, and the island Solea sank beneath the sea. Old tales, said Ged. But then he too began to look at the Lady of O, wondering if indeed this was such mortal beauty as the old tales told of. The master chanter had sung the deed of the young king, and all together had sung the winter carol. Now when there was a little pause before they all rose from the tables, Jasper got up and went to the table nearest the hearth, where the archmage and the guests and masters sat, and he spoke to the Lady of O. Jasper was no longer a boy, but a young man, tall and comely, with his cloak clasped at the neck with silver, for he also had been made sorcerer this year, and the silver clasp was the token of it. The lady smiled at what he said, and the opals shone in her black hair, radiant. Then, the masters nodding benign consent, Jasper worked an illusion charm for her. A white tree he made spring up from the stone floor. Its branches touched the high roof beams of the hall, and on every twig of every branch a golden apple shone, each a sun, for it was the year tree. A bird flew among the branches suddenly, all white with a tail like a fall of snow, and the golden apples dimming turned to seeds, each one a drop of crystal. These falling from the tree with a sound like rain, all at once there came a sweet fragrance, while the tree, swaying, put forth leaves of rosy fire and white flowers like stars. So the illusion faded. The Lady of O cried out with pleasure, and bent her shining head to the young sorcerer in praise of his mastery. "Come with us, live with us in Otokni. Can he not come, my lord?" she asked childlike of her stern husband. But Jasper said only, "When I have learned skills worthy of my masters here and worthy of your praise, my lady, then I will gladly come and serve you ever gladly." So he pleased all there, except Ged. Ged joined his voice to the praises, but not his heart. "I could have done better," he said to himself in bitter envy, and all the joy of the evening was darkened for him after that. Chapter 4. The Loosing of the Shadow. I'm gonna take another round of gummy. I'm gonna gummy up. I'm gonna gummy up. Stand back. Stand back. The flames are about to start to roll. Chapter 4. The Loosing of the Shadow. That spring Ged saw little of either Vetch or Jasper, for they, being sorcerers, studied now with the master patterner in the secrecy of the imminent grove, where no prentice might set foot. Ged stayed in the great house, working with the masters at all the skills practiced by sorcerers, those who work magic but carry no staff, wind-bringing, weather-working, finding and binding, and the arts of spellsmiths and spellwrights, tellers, chanters, heal-alls, and herbalists. At night, alone in his sleeping cell, a little ball of weirlight burning above the book in place of lamp or candle, he studied the further runes and the runes of Ea, which are used in the great spells. All these crafts came easy to him, and it was rumored among the students that this master or that had said that the Gauntish lad was the quickest student that had ever been at Roke, and tales grew up concerning the Otak, which was said to be a disguised spirit who whispered wisdom in Ged's ear, and it was even said that the Archmage's raven had hailed Ged at his arrival as Archmage to be. Whether or not they believed such stories, and whether or not they liked Ged, most of his companions admired him, and were eager to follow him when the rare wild mood came over him and he joined them to lead their games on the lengthening evenings of spring. But for the most part he was all work and pride and temper, and held himself apart. Among them all, Vetch being absent, he had no friend, and never knew he wanted one. He was 15, very young to learn any of the high arts of wizard or mage, those who carry the staff, but he was so quick to learn all the arts of illusion that the master changer, himself a young man, soon began to teach him apart from the others, and to tell him about the true spells of shaping. He explained how, if a thing is really to be changed into another thing, it must be renamed for as long as the spell lasts, and he told how this affects the names and natures of things surrounding the transformed thing. He spoke of the perils of changing, above all when the wizard transforms his own shape and thus is liable to be caught in his own spell. Little by little, drawn on by the boy's sureness of understanding, the young master began to do more than merely tell him of these mysteries. He taught him first one and then another of the great spells of change, and he gave him the book of shaping to study. This he did without knowledge of the Archmage, and unwisely, yet he meant no harm. Ged worked also with the master summoner now, but that master was a stern man, aged and hardened by the deep and somber wizardry he taught. He dealt with no illusion, only true magic, the summoning of such energies as light and heat and the force that draws the magnet, and those forces men perceive as weight, form, color, sound, real powers, drawn from the immense, fathomless energies of the universe, which no man's spells or uses could exhaust or unbalance. The weather workers and sea masters calling upon wind and water were crafts already known to his pupils, but it was he who showed them why the true wizard uses such spells only at need, since to summon up such earthly forces is to change the earth of which they are a part. Rain on Roke may be drought in Oskill, he said, and a calm in the east reach may be storm and ruin in the west, unless you know what you are about. Hold on, I'm going to take some Tylenol. Another half a caffeine pill. Just a little one. I just need just a little one. It's fine. No, I'm going to take some kratom too. You know what? Let's live large. Let's live large. This is the best part of this book, I think, this chapter. And I recall, it's the dramatic peak. No, I'm not sure I knew or noticed so closely. When I first read this, I was a kid, so I thought of it as a coming-of-age story. But it's also about the rise and fall through hubris, the tragedy of pride, of course. It's interesting that I was going to say it's interesting that Le Guin, that she that's how she couches her story of the youth of the wizard. It's about pride going before a fall. But because I'm 54 and have been through several stretches of career and life collapsing and rising again due to bad health. It seems like that kind of story too, like Timon of Athens or Nightmare Alley, like the tragic rise and fall. Hello, Toad Drags. How are you? Man, I need to get a better microphone for the reading streams, just for like headphone use. I need to get headphones too. Nice to see you again. As for the calling of real things and living people, and the raising up of spirits of the dead, and the invocations of the unseen, those spells which are the height of the summoner's art and the mage's power, those he scarcely spoke of to them. Once or twice Ged tried to lead him to talk a little of such mysteries, but the master was silent, looking at him long and grimly, till Ged grew uneasy and said no more. Sometimes indeed he was uneasy, working even such lesser spells as the summoner taught him. There were certain runes on certain pages of the lore book that seemed familiar to him, though he did not remember in what book he had ever seen them before. There were certain phrases that must be said in spells of summoning that he did not like to say. They made him think, for an instant, of shadows in a dark room, of a shut door and shadows reaching out to him from the corner by the door. Hastily he put such thoughts or memories aside and went on. These moments of fear and darkness, he said to himself, were the shadows merely of his ignorance. The more he learned, the less he would have to fear, until finally, in his full power as wizard, he needed fear nothing in the world, nothing at all. In the second month of that summer, all the school gathered again at the great house to celebrate the moon's night and the long dance, which that year fell together as one festival of 2 nights, which happens but once in 52 years. All the first night, the shortest night of full moon of the year, flutes played out in the fields, and the narrow streets of Thwill were full of drums and torches, and the sound of singing went out over the moonlit waters of Roke Bay. As the sun rose next morning, the chanters of Roke began to sing the long deed of Erith Akbi, which tells how the white towers of Havnor were built, and of Erith Akbi's journeys from the old island, Ea, through all the archipelago and the reaches, until at last in the uttermost west reach on the edge of the open sea he met the dragon Orm, and his bones in shattered armor lie among the dragon's bones on the shore of lonely Celador, but his sword set atop the highest tower of Havnor still burns red in the sunset above the inmost sea. When the chant was finished, the long dance began. Townsfolk and masters and students and farmers all together, men and women, danced in the warm dust and dusk down all the roads of rope to the sea beaches, to the beat of drums and drone of pipes and flutes. Straight out into the sea they danced, under the moon one night past full, and the music was lost in the breakers' sound. As the east grew light, they came back up the beaches and the roads, the drums silent and only the flutes playing soft and shrill. So it was done on every island of the archipelago that night. One dance, one music binding together the sea-divided lands. When the long dance was over, most people slept the day away and gathered again at evening to eat and drink. There was a group of young fellows, prentices and sorcerers, who had brought their supper out from the out from the refectory to hold private feast in a courtyard of the great house. Vetch, Jasper, and Ged were there, and 6 or 7 others, and some young lads released briefly from the isolate tower, for this festival had brought even Kerem Karmaruk out. They were all eating and laughing and playing such tricks out of pure frolic as might be the marvel of a king's court. One boy had lighted the court with 100 stars of weirlight, colored like jewels, that swung in a slow netted procession between them and the real stars. And a pair of boys were playing bowls with balls of green flame and bowling pins that leaped and hopped away as the ball came near. And all the while Vetch sat cross-legged, eating roast chicken up in mid-air. One of the younger boys tried to pull him down to earth, but Vetch merely drifted up a little higher out of reach and sat calmly smiling on the air. Now and then he tossed away a chicken bone, which turned to an owl and flew hooting among the netted starlights. Ged shot breadcrumb arrows after the owls and brought them down, and when they touched the ground, there they lay, bone and crumb, all illusion gone. Ged also tried to join Vetch up in the middle of the air, but lacking the key of the spell, he had to flap his arms to keep aloft, and they were all laughing at his flights and flaps and bumps. He kept up his foolishness for the laughter's sake, laughing with them, for after those 2 long nights of dance and moonlight and music and magery, he was in a fey and wild mood, ready for whatever might come. He came lightly down on his feet just beside Jasper at last, and Jasper, who never laughed aloud, moved away saying, "The sparrowhawk that can't fly." "Is Jasper a precious stone?" Ged returned, grinning. "O jewel among sorcerers, O gem of Havnor, sparkle for us." The lad that had set the lights dancing sent one down to dance and glitter about Jasper's head. Not quite as cool as usual, frowning, Jasper brushed the light away and snuffed it out with one gesture. "I am sick of boys and noise and foolishness," he said. "You're getting middle-aged, lad," Vetch remarked from above. "If silence and gloom is what you want," put in one of the younger boys, "you could always try the tower." Ged said to him, "What is it you want then, Jasper?" "I want the company of my equals," Jasper said. "Come on, Vetch, leave the prentices to their toys." Ged turned to face Jasper. "What do sorcerers have that prentices lack?" he inquired. His voice was quiet, but all the other boys suddenly fell still, for in his tone, as in Jasper's, the spite between them now sounded plain and clear as steel coming out of a sheath. "Power," Jasper said. "I'll match your power act for act. You challenge me, I challenge you." Vetch had dropped down to the ground, and now he came between them, grim of face. "Duels and sorcery are forbidden to us, and well you know it. Let this cease." Both Ged and Jasper stood silent, for it was true they knew the law of Roke, and they also knew that Vetch was moved by love and themselves by hate. Yet their anger was balked, not cooled. Presently, moving a little aside as if to be heard by Vetch alone, Jasper spoke with his cool smile. "I think you'd better remind your goat-herd friend again of the law that protects him. He looks sulky. I wonder, did he really think I'd accept a challenge from him? A fellow who smells of goats, a prentice who doesn't know the first change?" "Jasper," said Ged, "what do you know of what I know?" For an instant, with no word spoken that any heard, Ged vanished from their sight, and where he had stood a great falcon hovered, opening its hooked beak to scream. For one instant, and then Ged stood again in the flickering torchlight, his dark gaze on Jasper. Jasper had taken a step backward in astonishment, but now he shrugged and said one word, "Illusion." The others muttered. Vetch said that was not illusion, it was true change, and enough. Jasper, listen. Enough to prove that he sneaked a look in the book of shaping behind the master's back. What then? Go on, goatherd. I like this trap you're building for yourself. The more you try to prove yourself my equal, the more you show yourself for what you are. At that, Vetch turned from Jasper and said very softly to Ged, Sparrowhawk, will you be a man and drop this now? Come with me. Ged looked at his friend and smiled, but all he said was, keep hoeg for me a little while, will you? He put into Vetch's hands the little otak, which as usual had been riding on his shoulder. It had never let anyone but Ged touch it. Ged. It had never let any but Ged touch it, but it came to Vetch now, and climbing up his arm cowered on his shoulder, its great bright eyes always on its master. Now, Ged said to Jasper quietly as before, what are you going to do to prove yourself my superior, Jasper? I don't have to do anything, goatherd, yet I will. I will give you a chance, an opportunity. Envy eats you like a worm in an apple. Let's let out the worm. Once by Roke Knoll you boasted that Gauntish wizards don't play games. Come to Roke Knoll now and show us what it is they do instead. And afterward, maybe I will show you a little sorcery. Yes, I should like to see that, Ged answered. The younger boys, used to seeing his black temper break out at the least hint of slight or insult, watched him in wonder at his coolness now. Vetch watched him not in wonder, but with growing fear. He tried to intervene again, but Jasper said, come, keep out of this, Vetch. What will you do with the chance I give you, goatherd? Will you show us an illusion, a fireball, a charm to cure goats with the mange? What would you like me to do, Jasper? The older lad shrugged. Summon up a spirit from the dead for all I care. I will. You will not. Jasper looked straight at him, rage suddenly flaming out over his disdain. You will not. You cannot. You brag and brag. By my name, I will do it. They all stood utterly motionless for a moment. Breaking away from Vetch, who would have held him back by main force, Ged strode out of the courtyard, not looking back. The dancing weir lights overhead died out, sinking down. Jasper hesitated a second, then followed after Ged, and the rest came straggling behind, in silence, curious and afraid. Yeah. The slopes of Roke Knoll went up dark into the darkness of summer night before moonrise. The presence of that hill where many wonders had been worked was heavy, like a weight in the air about them. As they came onto the hillside, they thought of how the roots of it were deep, deeper than the sea, reaching down even to the old, blind, secret fires at the world's core. They stopped on the east slope. Stars hung over the black grass above them on the hill's crest. No wind blew. Ged went a few paces up the slope, away from the others, and turning, said in a clear voice, Jasper, whose spirit shall I call? Call whom you like, none will listen to you. Jasper's voice shook a little, with anger, perhaps. Ged answered him softly, mockingly, Are you afraid? He did not even listen for Jasper's reply if he made one. He no longer cared about Jasper. Now that they stood on Roke Knoll, hate and rage were gone, replaced by utter certainty. He need envy no one. He knew that his power this night on this dark enchanted ground was greater than it had ever been, filling him till he trembled with the sense of strength barely kept in check. He knew now that Jasper was far beneath him, had been sent perhaps only to bring him here tonight, no rival but a mere servant of Ged's destiny. Under his feet he felt the hill roots going down and down into the dark, and over his head he saw the dry far fires of the stars. Between, all things were his to order, to command. He stood at the center of the world. Don't be afraid, he said, smiling. I'll call a woman's spirit. You need not fear a woman. Elfaran I will call, the fair lady of the deed of Enlad. She died 1,000 years ago. Her bones lie afar under the sea of Ea, and maybe there never was such a woman. Do years and distances matter to the dead? Do the songs lie? Ged said with the same gentle mockery, and then saying, Watch the air between my hands. He turned away from the others and stood still. In a great slow gesture, he stretched out his arms, the gesture of welcome that opens an invocation. He began to speak. He had read the runes of this spell of summoning in Ogion's book 2 years and more ago, and never since had seen them. In darkness, he had read them then. Now, in this darkness, it was as if he read them again on the page open before him in the night. But now he understood what he read, speaking it aloud word after word, and he saw the markings of how the spell must be woven with the sound of the voice and the motion of body and hand. The other boys stood watching, not speaking, not moving unless they shivered a little, for the great spell was beginning to work. Ged's voice was soft still, but changed, with a deep singing in it, and the words he spoke were not known to them. He fell silent. Suddenly the wind rose roaring in the grass. Ged dropped to his knees and called out aloud. Then he fell forward as if to embrace earth with his outstretched arms, and when he rose he held something dark in his straining hands and arms, something so heavy that he shook with effort getting to his feet. The hot wind whined in the black tossing grasses on the hill. If the stars shone now, none saw them. The words of the enchantment hissed and mumbled on Ged's lips, and then he cried out aloud and clearly, Elfaran. Again he cried the name, Elfaran. The shapeless mass of darkness he had lifted split apart. It sundered, and a pale spindle of light gleamed between his opened arms, a faint oval reaching from the ground up to the height of his raised hands. In the oval of light, for a moment, there moved a form, a human shape, a tall woman looking back over her shoulder. Her face was beautiful and sorrowful and full of fear. Only for a moment did the spirit glimmer there. Then the sallow oval between Ged's arms grew bright. It widened and spread, a rent in the darkness of the earth and night, a ripping open of the fabric of the world. Through it blazed a terrible brightness, and through that bright misshapen breach clambered something like a clot of black shadow, quick and hideous, and it leaped straight out at Ged's face. Staggering back under the weight of the thing, Ged gave a short, hoarse scream. The little Otak, watching from Vetch's shoulder, the animal that had no voice, screamed aloud also and leaped as if to attack. Ged fell, struggling and writhing, while the bright rip in the world's darkness above him widened and stretched. The boys that watched fled, and Jasper bent down to the ground, hiding his eyes from the terrible light. Vetch alone ran forward to his friend. So only he saw the lump of shadow that clung to Ged, tearing at his flesh. It was like a black beast, the size of a young child, though it seemed to swell and shrink, and it had no head or face, only the 4-taloned paws with which it gripped and tore. Vetch sobbed with horror, yet he put out his hands to try to pull the thing away from Ged. Before he touched it, he was bound still, unable to move. The intolerable brightness faded, and slowly the torn edges of the world closed together. Nearby, a voice was speaking as softly as a tree whispers or a fountain plays. Starlight began to shine again, and the grasses of the hillside were whitened with the light of the moon just rising. The night was healed. Restored and steady lay the balance of light and dark. The shadow beast was gone. Ged lay sprawled on his back, his arms flung out as if they yet kept the wide gesture of welcome and invocation. His face was blackened with blood, and there were great black stains on his shirt. The little Otak cowered by his shoulder, quivering, and above him stood an old man whose cloak glimmered pale in the moonrise, the Archmage Nemerly. The end of Emerly's staff hovered silvery above Ged's breast. Once gently it touched him over the heart, once on the lips, while Nemerly whispered. Ged stirred, and his lips parted, gasping for breath. Then the old Archmage lifted the staff and set it to earth, and leaned heavily on it with bowed head, as if he had scarcely strength to stand. Vetch found himself free to move. Looking around, he saw that others already were there, the Master's summoner and changer. An act of great wizardry is not worked without arousing such men, and they had ways of coming very swiftly when need called, though none had been so swift as the Archmage. They now sent for help, and some who came went with the Archmage, while others, Vetch among them, carried Ged to the chambers of the Master Herbal. Where's the water? I had to not come up for air for a couple of pages. I couldn't. I really need some water, but I couldn't interrupt that. I was like, oh my god, what's gonna happen? I actually remember that scene really vividly from when I first read this when I was a kid. Um, though I remember when I first read this when I was 9 or 10, being a little confused as to what actually happened. Though I'm not confused now. It's a portal. Like, what? It's confusing. Maybe I should have read it out loud then. Um, she toe drags. Yeah, it's really good. Hey, Justo Dean, how are you? Um, I really like Tolkien. She does a really good job of describing magic as actually magical. Um, and I also, it has over Harry Potter that it's funny because I was talking about this in a recent stream that the Harry Potter stories are an interesting feat of storytelling, but they aren't um, they aren't a neoclassical tragedy, so they aren't really like a play or a movie. Um, how's the reading tonight? I'm not done yet, Justo Dean. I'm still in the middle of the chapter. It's a long one because chapter 4 is long. Though I guess I could stop there. I'm not going to. I think it's just a couple more pages. Uh, really? 12 more? Really? Well, that's a bit steep. Definitely going to read for 10 or 15 more minutes, though. I'm trying to. I mean, it's it's cool to do the reading stream and hang out and interrupt a little. It's cool to do these for, I want them to break 2 hours, but it's really hard to maintain my energy for reading for more than about an hour 15. You can hear it, like my energy slack, like my voice. I'm not in as good a voice, but maybe I just need to make a point of taking a break. I'm taking more stimulants tonight than I usually do while I do this. Like I took another round of caffeine because I knew it was going to be long. Nice sample of her writing to hear for the first time. Yeah. This novel's really great. Really great. Like it's really, really good. Um, yeah. Uh he like unlike Harry Potter, the last time I tried to watch the first Harry Potter movie, I found Harry himself lacking character in a sort of mean-spirited, childish, self-centered way, a little disturbing. It's not, I mean, the story isn't about Harry's character. Um, so it doesn't particularly matter that he isn't a particularly great kid. He isn't some kind of noble, heroic character. Um, he's just a kid. But that in itself is, to me, disappointing. I feel like it doesn't reflect the needs of the story as far as I would see them as a classicist, as a screenwriter. Screenwriting is essentially neoclassical. Um, uh, for Ursula Le Guin, that's the heart of the matter here. That you postulate a kid who is the greatest wizard ever and immediately follows some kind of understanding that there will be a fall from grace through pride, through hubris. Of course. How else could it be otherwise? Uh, what is he, Superman? Um, so so it's already ahead of the Harry Potter stories. There's also this odd thing with the Harry Potter stories where it it doesn't really handle graduation very well. Like she seems to, I haven't read all the books, I did see all the movies, but it seems like Rowling resents herself the structure of school, staff being teachers being wizards who are like her wizards aren't necessarily wise or more powerful. She doesn't have a very, I mean, Rowling doesn't really have a mystical streak at all. Like for her, it really is like you say things in Latin and it does things. Like it isn't. This whole idea of the balance, this matrixy talk, there ain't none of that in Rowling's Harry Potter stories. Not really. But there is a lot of this idea that the people you look up to are not what they seem in negative ways. Yeah, I don't know. This is probably another half hour of reading, but I'm going to try to finish the chapter. I said I was going to read it says in the title I'm going to read all of chapter 4. All night long the summoner stayed on Roke Knoll, keeping watch. Nothing stirred there on the hillside where the stuff of the world had been torn open. No shadow came crawling through moonlight, seeking the rent through which it might clamber back into its own domain. It had fled from Nemrali and from the mighty spell walls that surround and protect Roke Island, but it was in the world now. In the world somewhere, it hid. If Ged had died that night, it might have tried to find the doorway he had opened and follow him into death's realm, or slip back into whatever place it had come from. For this the summoner waited on Roke Knoll, but Ged lived. They had laid him a bed in the healing chamber, and the master herbal tended the wounds he had on his face and throat and shoulder. They were deep, ragged, and evil wounds. The black blood in them would not stanch, welling out even under the charms and the cobweb-wrapped periot leaves laid upon them. Ged lay blind and dumb in fever like a stick in a slow fire, and there was no spell to cool what burned him. Not far away, in the unroofed court where the fountain played, the archmage lay also unmoving, but cold, very cold. Only his eyes lived, watching the fall of moonlit water and the stir of moonlit leaves. Those with him said no spells and worked no healing. Quietly they spoke among themselves from time to time, and then turned again to watch their lord. He lay still, hawk nose and high forehead and white hair bleached by moonlight all to the color of bone. To check the ungoverned spell and drive off the shadow from Ged, Nemrali had spent all his power, and with it his bodily strength was gone. He lay dying. But the death of a great mage, who has many times in his life walked on the dry, steep hillsides of Death's kingdom, is a strange matter, for the dying man goes not blindly, but surely knowing the way. When Nemrali looked up through the leaves of the tree, those with him did not know if he watched the stars of summer fading in daybreak, or those other stars, which never set above the hills that see no dawn. The raven of Oskill that had been his pet for 30 years was gone. No one had seen where it went. It flies before him, the master patterner said as they kept vigil. The day came warm and clear. The great house and the streets of Thwill were hushed. No voice was raised until along towards noon, iron bells spoke out aloud in the chanter's tower, harshly tolling. On the next day, the 9 masters of Roke gathered in a place somewhere under the dark trees of the imminent grove. Even there they set 9 walls of silence about them, that no person or power might speak to them or hear them, as they chose from amongst the mages of all Earthsea him who would be the new archmage. Gensher of Way was chosen. A ship was sent forth at once across the inmost sea to Way Island to bring the archmage back to Roke. The master wind key stood in the stern and raised up the mage wind into the sail, and quickly the ship departed and was gone. Of these events Ged knew nothing. For 4 weeks of that hot summer he lay blind and deaf and mute, though at times he moaned and cried out like an animal. At last, as the patient crafts of the master herbal worked their healing, his wounds began to close and the fever left him. Little by little he seemed to hear again, though he never spoke. On a clear day of autumn, the master herbal opened the shutters of the room where Ged lay. Since the darkness of that night on Roke Knoll, he had known only darkness. Now he saw daylight and the sun shining. He hid his scarred face in his hands and wept. Still, when winter came, he could speak only with a stammering tongue, and the master herbal kept him there in the healing chambers, trying to lead his body and mind gradually back to strength. It was early spring when at last the master released him, sending him first to offer his fealty to the archmage Gensher, for he had not been able to join all the others of the school in this duty when Gensher came to Roke. None of his companions had been allowed to visit him in the months of his sickness, and now as he passed, some of them asked one another, "Who is that?" He had been light and lithe and strong. Now, lamed by pain, he went hesitantly, and did not raise his face, the left side of which was white with scars. He avoided those who knew him and those who did not, and made his way straight to the court of the fountain. There where once he had awaited Nemerly, Genscher awaited him. Like the old archmage, the new one was cloaked in white, but like most men of Way and the East Reach, Genscher was black-skinned, and his look was black under thick brows. Ged knelt and offered him fealty and obedience. Genscher was silent a while. "I know what you did," he said at last, "but not what you are. I cannot accept your fealty." Ged stood up and set his hand on the trunk of the young tree beside the fountain to steady himself. He was still very slow to find words. "Am I to leave Roke, my lord?" "Do you want to leave Roke?" "No. What do you want? To stay, to learn, to undo the evil?" Nemerly himself could not do that. "No, I would not let you go from Roke. Nothing protects you but the power of the masters here and the defenses laid upon this island that keep the creatures of evil away. If you left now, the thing you loosed would find you at once and enter into you and possess you. You would be no man but a Gebeth, a puppet doing the will of that evil shadow which you raised up into the sunlight. You must stay here until you gain strength and wisdom enough to defend yourself from it if ever you do. Even now it waits for you. Assuredly, it waits for you. Have you seen it since that night?" "In dreams, Lord." After a while, Ged went on, speaking with pain and shame. "Lord Genscher, I do not know what it was, the thing that came out of the spell and cleaved to me. Nor do I know. It has no name. You have great power inborn in you, and you used that power wrongly to work a spell over which you had no control, not knowing how that spell affects the balance of light and dark, life and death, good and evil. And you were moved to do this by pride and by hate. Is it any wonder the result was ruin? You summoned a spirit from the dead, but with it came one of the powers of unlife. Uncalled, it came from a place where there are no names. Evil, it wills to work evil through you. The power you had to call it gives it power over you. You are connected. It is the shadow of your arrogance, the shadow of your ignorance, the shadow you cast. Has a shadow a name?" Ged stood sick and haggard. He said at last, "Better I had died." "Who are you to judge that, you for whom Nemerly gave his life? You are safe here. You will live here and go on with your training. They tell me you were clever. Go on and do your work. Do it well. It is all you can do." So Genscher ended and was suddenly gone, as is the way of mages. The fountain leaped in the sunlight, and Ged watched it a while and listened to its voice, thinking of Nemerly. Once in that court he had felt himself to be a word spoken by the sunlight. Now the darkness also had spoken, a word that could not be unsaid. All right, I'm going to stop there, actually. There's several more pages till the end of the chapter, but that's a good place to stop. I'm going to invite you again to donate to the cause. You'd be buying groceries this week, and unfortunately not amendments to the channel and its technical specs. PayPal.me/Roganautica. I turn on the monetization after I do these reading streams live, but I have it turned off while I do it live. It's the few of you who are here who would get interrupted by ad breaks. It's not worth it. But you can donate to the dono button or the PayPal.me/Roganautica link. Thank you guys. I really like this book. I really like this book a lot. I think the horror short stories are definitely more popular, but I gotta go read some now. Actually, Dave dug out a collection of Kipling for me to go through, so there's that. But it's time consuming finding short stories I can read. I'll see you guys in the next one. I'm aiming for 10 o'clock every night with the reading streams. As soon as I have a job getting in the way, though, I will have a job getting in the way. We'll see how that goes. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks a lot.